Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss a few things that Rishi Sunak has been faced with since coming out of hiding today. So he's thrown a fire blanket over the raging inferno that is his party, and he's hoping that'll do the trick while he tries to regain the initiative. There's been a little bit of a setback to Sunak's claim that his Stop the Boats plan is working, but not to worry, because he's distracting us from all that by throwing some serious shade at Boris Johnson. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So I'm afraid the Tory skip fire isn't going away. I was all ready to get on to the latest Brexit news, but that's going to have to wait until tomorrow, I hope, because Sunak has come out fighting. Now, I don't know whether to be inspired or just amused, but there's no downside from my point of view to this latest bout of Sunak v Johnson. Incidentally, for those wondering, my access to the studio is going to be a little bit limited this week. I've got someone in doing some work, so a few videos will not only be recorded in my office, but also maybe a little more freely in terms of the scripting, like starting with this one. So let's look at the boat situation first. So Sunak seized on news that channel crossings were down a bit recently. What was it, a week or two ago? He claimed this proved that his plan was working, but his plan was to legislate to stop the boats. But the legislation hasn't been passed by Parliament yet, so his plan hasn't been implemented. So how could his plan be working? Then a canny journalist from ITV, I gather, pointed out that the weather had been a bit crap of late in the channel. Maybe that's why there are fewer already dangerous small boat crossings. You know, water's a bit choppy, Sunak, me old China. No, it's me plan, insisted Sunak. It's me plan. All right, then. So I just looked ahead at the forecast for the very summery weather that we are now in the middle of. And guess what? Channel crossings have massively increased. Oh, when did they increase? Oh, this weekend. Was that when the weather got really warm and the, you know, yeah. My goodness, would you believe it? Because that's what you do. If you want to know if channel crossings are going, if you want to be like, look into the future, if you want to see if the channel crossings are going to go up or down, you don't check on the progress of Sunak's plan because his plan is useless. You just check the weather forecast. If you want a non-divine intervention way to deal with these numbers, provide safe routes for those seeking asylum and process the claims properly. We have the option to process the claims in France, meaning no bugger comes across the channel without being turned back immediately, but the government aren't doing that. So the channel crossings will be as they are. In fact, not only were the channel crossings up this warm, summery weekend, but it's a record for this year. A record. Almost like maybe the weather has a part to play in how likely dangerous channel crossings are to take place. And I'll also crowbar this in as well. Another reason why I don't think Sunak wants an autumn election. All the talk is of next autumn being the general election. It could be, but I don't think he's got his sights set on it at the moment. Because not only will the NHS be collapsing again, but he'll have the entire summer's crossing numbers sellotaped to his back. No point in leaving it any later either, because it doesn't matter if it'll be coming down again in winter. Those numbers will be there. See, the way you get a crap plan to work in politics is you make sure you go to the polls before the plan comes into operation. The second Sunak's legislation passes, people will be looking out for signs of whether it's working or not. You know, people who care will want to know, are those crossings going down? So they will look at next summer. The longer he leaves it, the worse it gets for him. But the news may not be quite so full of the boat story as would otherwise be the case, because despite Nigel Farage doing his nut, Sunak was determined to distract us all with another pop at Johnson. Oh, and it's worked. It seems that with Johnson's resignation, which presumably I assume it's taking place today. It hasn't happened at the point I'm recording this. Sunak obviously feels free to give him a metaphorical kicking. Sunak told journalists this morning, with respect to the recent row over peerages, that Johnson asked him to overrule the House of Lords Appointments Committee and that he wasn't prepared to do that. Oh, no, he's not right. I'm running a government that is honest. He said if people don't like that, then tough. and them's fighting words. You know, I said in the first video that I was clearly missing something. Sunak has engineered a situation whereby 2 of Johnson's allies have resigned. Didn't have to happen. He could have stopped it. He couldn't stop Johnson resigning. He could stop the other 2, Adams and Doris. He could have stopped them resigning, no problem at all. He didn't do. Why? Why give himself these tricky by-elections? You know, I'm not sure he'd be right in thinking, by the way, that it's worth it to, because what's happening here is he's trying to create distance between himself and Johnson. That seems to be the motivation here. I mean, he really stuck the knife into Johnson here. He's clearly decided he'll never get on the right side of Johnson's allies in the media, so sod it. What Sunak rather has done here is 2 things. First, he said that Johnson has sought to do something that is wrong, morally wrong. That's quite a big statement. It's true, but it's quite a big statement. In this case, of course, subvert the normal procedure for elevating people to the House of Lords. But Sunak's use of the term, and I quote, "I wasn't prepared to do that. I didn't think it was right." That would be an extraordinary thing for any party member to say about a predecessor. But against the background of the imminent publication of the Privileges Committee report, it is particularly stinging criticism. Sunak is essentially aligning himself with public opinion, on this issue at least, something he needs to do in order to give himself a chance next year. Even Conservative voters tend to think that, if you look at polls, they tend to think that Johnson does need to bugger off now. They're much happier with Sunak in charge than Johnson. Not necessarily Conservative Party members, that's not the same thing. So he might still be storing trouble up for himself at the conference, we'll have to see. But the second thing this does is to say that the Conservatives are better off without Johnson. After all, if Johnson tries to seek a candidacy for the general election, how can Sunak allow it now after saying that Johnson essentially tried to corrupt him? So if Johnson even attempts a comeback before the general election, if he attempts, for example, to be made the candidate for Henley, where he's just bought the house, it seems to me that Sunak is prepared to block it. Because this was a really in-your-face statement. You know, this isn't me reading into things. Like both Grant Shapps and Michael Gove in the last 24 hours pretty much have said that they need to move on from Johnson. The party needs to move on from Johnson. But when asked specifically a question that would have involved, if answered truthfully, attacking Johnson's character or anything, they didn't. They dodged it completely. Sunak has not dodged it. And this is what he needs to do. This is absolutely what he needs to do. I said this weekend, Sunak will have his MPs, the vast majority of his MPs behind him, if only he will lead them. You know, Tory MPs, they're really like any other party's MPs. They're there to win elections. You know, it's the bread and butter of politics. Yes, there are some who don't seem to understand the electoral process, who find themselves in Parliament. That is because someone else did the hard work for them. But ultimately, whether for noble or selfish reasons, MPs want to win elections. With Sunak, they have a chance, from their point of view, at least of limiting the damage if they don't think they can win. Johnson represents only more pain and disappointment. They can get nothing from Johnson. Most of his MPs will absolutely get behind Sunak on this one. But it may also be worth considering how Johnson will be taking this. How will Boris Johnson take this? See, a narcissist whose wealth and privilege from a very young age allowed him to surround himself with people who would tell him that his nakedness was the collection of the finest silks in the world. He is now thrust into a world where people are telling him that he is a colossal waste of space. That not only does he not matter, but that he is not even tolerated. To any narcissist, that would be excruciating, I would think. To one who has lived for 5.5 decades without having to face the window into the real world, it must be absolutely maddening. No wonder Boris Johnson's going around looking like he's permanently drunk. One final thought, though. I've said in the past, I don't rate the political acumen of either Rishi Sunak or his advisors. I don't think it's unreasonable to doubt them, given the PR cock-ups which have characterised Sunak's political career so far. Like, for example, trying to pay for petrol with a can of Coke, or, you know, oh, do you work in business to a homeless person? But he'd better be sure he's getting this one right. Don't get me wrong. He's on the right side of the parliamentary party and much of his target voters. Remember, it's the target voters who are much more annoyed at Johnson. But the strategy only works if he's managed to get Boris Johnson in his box. If Johnson has got absolutely any serious leverage on Sunak, if he's got any goods on him at all, the whole thing falls apart. The WhatsApp messages that Johnson is desperate to give to the inquiry, for example, we know they're not the ones that the inquiry actually wants. But what if there's something on them that is deeply damaging to Sunak? May well be that the Tories are going to gift or blight us, depending on your point of view, with one more year of high drama and chaos before finally letting us put them out of their misery. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.